gather where I've not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers. And at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast in the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I want to talk to you this morning just for a little bit about don't bury it, embrace it. The talent, first thing I want to look at here is the talent belongs to the master. And so we look at this and some, I guess you start to think that what they had, that we look through it, that they had ownership on, but the talent, what they had received, and we'll talk about what that is in a minute, was their master's, it wasn't theirs. Something for us to keep in mind. It's something that is borrowed. So what your talent and your ability and your finances and all that, truly, in a sense, we are given authority over that in this life, but it belongs to God. And what you've been given, that you're able to do are God-given talents. And so those are things that as we see athletes and people, like some of us will go out and we could, as much as we could exercise and run, and we're only going to run so fast of a mile. And because there's people out there and they train and do everything they can, but their ability only goes but so far, and others it exceeds beyond that. And that could be in all facets of life and several different things where some people just have a knack for things and others don't. But you each have your own talent, your ability, your gifts that God has gifted you with. So there's several different views when you read this parable. If you go to listen to other pastors and read commentary, there's different views on the talent and what this means. But I think the really obvious thing that stands out is that I take away from this is to do the best with what God has given you, regardless of what it is. That we all have been given opportunity, and it is up to you, it is up to us how we choose to use the opportunity and the talent that we've been given. And so, are we good stewards of what God has given us? Our time, our talent, our treasure. We saw the man with one talent went and buried it. He was afraid. His little bit didn't matter. So the one talent man, he went away. He just looked at what he had, and he compared his ability to these other two of what he was given, and he thought his little bit really didn't matter. He must have thought little of me to give me this amount, and so he took, and he didn't think it was that important. He actually even feared the master of how he might react, and so the safest thing for him to do was just to bury it and just give back to him what he gave to him. So again, this morning, I want to talk to you. Don't bury it, embrace it. And so another thing we see here is we are slaves to the master. Man, that sounds like a terrible thing. But slavery, because a lot of atheists and people are trying to debunk the Bible, they'll go to the Old Testament, something they'll pull out where it talks about how to treat your slaves. Well, this language and how the terminology, a better way to put that would be a servant or employee. So they would go to the slave market and stand there, and they would do that by choice because they needed work. And that's just the term that they used then. And so to be a slave to the master wasn't a bad thing. So all of our gifts, natural or spiritual, have been entrusted to us with purpose. So what we possess, again, isn't ours. Romans 6 says, we were once slaves to sin, now we are slaves to righteousness. Maybe you're thinking slaves to righteousness, that sounds kind of bad, that sounds not good. But when you consider this, no matter your race, your religion, your creed, no matter what, we all are slaves to something. Every one of us in here, we're slaves to something, we are given to something. Whether it's money, your job, a hobby, even things like sin, lust, and bitterness, hatred. You realize that we can make a god in our life of something that we cannot stand. A long time ago, the simplest way I know how to put it is whatever consumes your thoughts the most is your God. So if you're consumed by something that someone has done to you, that you have hatred in your heart, or you just can't stand the sight of them, what you hate is become your God. They are masters over you because they're controlling your emotion, your thought. But whatever consumes our thought and consumes our life, whatever we want to spend our most free time doing, essentially is our God. We have to work, we have to do things in life, but what we choose outside of that, what consumes us, is our God. And so we can have God, capital G-O-D, or we can have God's lowercase G-O-D. So you're either a slave to sin or you're a slave to righteousness. So if you're a slave to righteousness, a slave to the master, you're not upset about it. Because our master, if we're a slave to righteousness and to our master, he rewards us. He takes care of his people. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He is our strong tower. He will pull you out of the miry pit, out of the clay. He will forgive your sin as far as the east is from the west. He gave his only begotten son that we might be forgiven of our sins. So to be a slave to the master of righteousness is not a bad thing. Nobody's upset about that. But we can become servants to slaves in our life. Things in our life that controls us. Rabbi Zacharias said this. He said, sin will take you farther than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you want to pay. And you've probably heard that many times in your life. And I was thinking about that. And my thoughts on that are, righteousness will take you places that are unreachable, keep you in the nearness of Christ, and pay you more than it costs. So there's a joy in being a slave to righteousness. And so he's not only, we have to take this talent, we've been given opportunity, you've been given opportunity according to your ability, and we are slaves to the master. So wherever he calls us, whatever he calls us to do, we're willing and able and ready to go. So we're given opportunity, and it says, in Ecclesiastes 9:11, one of my favorite books of the Bible, it says, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happens to them all. We're all given opportunity. Regardless if you grow up in a ghetto in the middle of somewhere, you've been given opportunity to make our own choices. Now, some of us, it maybe our choices are set up and placed out a little bit easier before us, but everyone is given opportunity. Bury it, don't, or do embrace it. I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're breathing, there's a reason. That's what I was thinking about. If you woke up today, if your heart is still beating, if you have air in your lungs, there's a reason you're alive today, because God could have taken you out and he didn't. So every day we would be incredible. We talked about last week, be incredible. Every day that we wake up, there's a purpose for our life. And we live in the rat race, and so it's easy just to settle into the flow and just go with emotions. And before we know it, 10, 20, 30 years are gone. Chuck Swindoll says there are 4 things that don't come back: the spoken word, the spent arrow, time past, and neglected opportunity. Another man says we are all faced with a series of great opportunities brilliantly disguised as unsolvable problems. Pogo, a great philosopher, said, gentlemen, we are surrounded by insurmountable opportunities. So when you come into a place and a moment in your life when there's opportunity to invest in somebody, to make a difference in somebody's life, to share the gospel or share Jesus with the cashier at Food Line when you're afraid and you're like, man, I need to invite him to church, and you're scared. Sometimes opportunity is given that's never offered again. When you go to visit that person who's sick and not well and you just don't know how to talk to them about Lord, that may be your only opportunity. And we can all think of things in our life where we had an opportunity and we squandered it and we wish we'd have did differently, and have we learned from that? So when it comes, be ready. The servant in verse 14, he missed his opportunity. He was given opportunity. He was given something he didn't have and he didn't deserve, but he squandered it. He missed opportunity. And I want to take a look at why for a minute. The first reason is we're not equally gifted. I think we need to understand that, embrace that as well, as we are not equally gifted. So we saw the first servant got 1 talent. Now, a talent isn't what the whole time you've been thinking, what's he talented at? A talent is money. So one guy says it's worth this much, another says this. I don't know. Here's one I was going to meet in the middle. 1 talent is 75 pounds of silver, around $250,000 today. So he was given 1 talent, and the next guy, he was given $500,000, and then the third servant was given $1 million and something. Yeah, I'm not good at math. I don't even want to think about it. So the master came and he gave to each servant, and look at this in verse 14 in the bottom, it says, to each according to his own ability. And with that, let me say that some people will say, and that they might even use this to say that God will never give you more than you can handle. That is bull malarkey. How many of you will testify God will give you more than you can handle? Because that sometimes is the only way that we'll get to our knees that we look up. When you get saved, when you become a believer, does all of a sudden you realize I'm without hope, without forgiveness. There's nothing I can do. I don't have enough money. I can't work hard enough. It doesn't matter if I know the right people. There's nothing I can do to receive forgiveness other than through Jesus Christ. And it forces us to a place where we have to surrender to Him. And without surrender, you're not saved. You have to surrender to Him fully and completely out of your own talent and ability. It's by faith that we are saved.
Amen.
So we are not gifted the same. We do not have the same ability. And if we compare our ability to others, that's really discouraging. And you ever desire to do something and you have somebody else who's just really, really good at it, and it's just not for you? Isn't that's frustrating? And you're like, man, I just wish I could do that. I always wanted to play guitar. So I remember as a kid, Mom got me, I had every instrument. I had drums. I beat a hole in it. It broke like 6 months in, and it was terrible. God bless that happening. My parents kept saying, yeah, it's really good. Let's put them in the basement. So that's where I broke that at. Then I got an acoustic guitar, and my fingers just aren't, whatever this is, they're not that. So I got a bass guitar. I'm like, all right, bass. I got a size 17 wedding. I have sausage fingers. That's what they call me. A lot of people, they call me mitts or sausage fingers or whatever. So I was like, all right, a bass. That's like big fingered people can play bass. And that was terrible too. I just can't I don't understand music. I just can't. It's not in me. And I tried and I wanted to do it, but I'm just not gifted at it. And it honestly, and some people might disagree and say, but I really did try. I put forth my best effort, but no matter how hard I tried, it just wasn't something that I could pick up on. But when you're somebody who can do it, you're like, oh yeah, you can do it. It's not hard. Well, no, you can't. I mean, if you can't jump 24 inches up off the ground, you can't do it. You just can't. You can try, you can exercise, but I just can't do it. It's not going to happen. So instead of wasting my time trying to jump 24 inches off the ground, I need to, figure out something else. I need to focus on something else. It's be okay with, if it's not your ability, be okay with that. Because God has just something for you that you can be just as passionate about, that other people look at you and be like, man, I wish I could do this the way that they did. I wish I had the passion that they had for this area in their life. So God has gifted and given each of us opportunity, but He's given it to us according to our own ability. And we should be grateful for that. But man, we look at these other people and we compare ourselves and we get disappointed. And so we look at others and we see how good they are at their ability, and we look at ours and we're like, but I can't do that. What I have to do isn't important. Like church, you think about right now all the things that are going on that we can be here. So a nursery worker might think what I'm doing isn't that significant, but that nursery worker who's over there now is keeping somebody able to stay in here.
Amen. And
so they rotate every week. So a nursery worker is extremely important, because if we didn't have nursery workers, we'd have screaming babies. And so some people are like, man, I don't want to miss church or whatever. But if you can, you're being a blessing to somebody else, even if you're struggling with what you're having to do. So a nursery worker is extremely important. And sometimes you just, we kind of take it for granted that the kids are over there.
Amen.
So the first guy who got to tell he was scared, he was ashamed because what he had wasn't significant, he felt, compared to the others. And he was scared of the task that the master left for him. He was ashamed with his least of the ability. So instead of messing things up and taking an opportunity, giving him the servant win, he buries his money in the ground, where it's no use to anyone, but it's safe. It doesn't do anybody good. It's like Benji taking his guitar and putting it in a closet. It's safe there. It's not going to get broken. Kids aren't going to come by and mess it up or knock it over, and nobody's going to steal it. But it doesn't do anybody any good when we bury our talent. And so I heard a preacher say a long time ago, or just a short time ago, some of you may have heard this too. He said, I would rather you aim high and miss than aim low and hit. It's a good thought. Because of fear and embarrassment, sometimes we bury our talent. Sometimes trying to think of how I want to do this here. Y'all know that I do this. If you're a visitor here, sometimes I stop and I got to think, should I say that or not? I do that a lot. But some of us in here, you need to embrace your ability, no matter how small or no matter how great it might be. And some of us are just one talent people, and that's the way that it is. Nothing you can do about it. If you're a one talent, but let me give you an example. I'm a one talent preacher. Maybe not that. Some of you, right? He ain't in here. Dan, be quiet. But I embrace it. Let me tell you why I think they say, man, you shouldn't talk bad about yourself. No, I love being a one talent preacher. Let me tell you why. God has called me to New Hope, Virginia. We're 900 people. And I'm so glad. Well, I hope that we grow. And I'm not saying that you can't grow into, to be, remember when they took and they used their talent wisely, they were given more. And he says, because you were faithful over little, I will give you more. And so it's not that we're stuck in this place, but we have to grow. And He's only going to give us responsibility over areas that we're going to be able to produce in. And so I've embraced that I'm a one-talent preacher, and I love it. A friend of mine was called to downtown Stanton. It's not a huge city, but it's bigger than here. There's another guy that I know, he's in Richmond right now, starting a church in inner city Richmond, like near Broad Street. I got lost on Broad Street one time when I was in Bible college, and I don't have a desire to even be there, much less have a church there. Got weird looks. They don't have mud tires and hunting stickers over there. And when I was lost, they knew I wasn't from there. And so some people are called to D.C. or to Charlotte or called to these big places because they've been given an ability to work with great amounts of people. God has made them that way and designed them. He said, hey, I've created you and I need you to go and I have a ministry for here because you can handle it. You're a two-talent preacher. I'm a one-talent preacher, and I love that I'm a one-talent preacher. God gives us responsibility according to what we can handle. I'm not jealous of the pastor in Richmond or D.C. because I don't like the city life. I don't really like being around a bunch of people. You're like, that's nice to know. No, but I'm good here. That's why I'm here. Because I'm getting ready to go to a pastor's conference. There's going to be like 7,000 people there. And I'm going to go in and do like y'all back there. And I'm going to sit on the back row. And I'm going to talk to as few people as I possibly can. I love one-on-one. I love sitting down and talking with people. I love having conversations with families. I have a hard time with this. Like, well, that's kind of weird, aren't you? I'm just telling you the truth. I have a hard time being around a lot of people. I feel like there's a lot of things that I say that are being recorded right now. That could not be a good thing. But he gives us this responsibility of what we can handle according to our ability. And so, but the big city, the big church sort of stresses me out a little bit, gets me a little bit amped up. I've realized I lived in Richmond for 4 years. I hate traffic jams, red lights, and pedestrian crossing. But I love back roads, stop signs, and deer crossing. I'm a one-talent preacher, and I'm all right with that. I love being in a town that I can drive 5 miles in any direction and not hit a stoplight. I love that.
Amen.
This may sound weird to you, but I love getting stuck behind tractors. So I need to tell you, all right, why? So I was in Richmond, and I was stuck in this traffic jam, and I was thinking about home. I was kind of homesick. And I was thinking, man, this don't happen at home. I'm like, it's the only time this happens if we get stuck behind a tractor. And I remember sitting there, I'm serious, I was sitting there, I'm like, God, if you get me back there, I'll never complain about driving behind a tractor ever again. Please, God, get me out of this place. And so now I'm being serious. I'm still glad there's people, Farmer Dave driving his tractor up and down there. I love that because it reminds us where we're from.
Amen.
You know, there's people in the cities that've never seen a cow, honestly. There's actually a mission, a missions team what they do is they bring inner city kids into the country, and they get here and they're amazed. They take them on the farms. They go collect eggs from the chickens, and they should make them serve the turkey dinner. And I don't know what all they do, but they get here and they've never seen anything like what we see every day. Nobody from here drives around and goes, look. See, look, there's 20 cows over there. Do you see that? It's the last time you saw maybe a deer, a buck, but nobody rides by and they're excited because cows are in the field. They're everywhere. So I remember coming home for college break, and I was coming up 608. I would get off in Fishersville and come up 608. And those of you from here, you know, when you come into New Hope, you know when Bernie Klein is fertilizing. You know it. Can we get an amen to that, everybody? You know. Well, I don't know what it is about that. Oh, I don't know. Maybe Farmer Dave can do it. It stinks over there when he fertilizes. It's bad. You can taste it almost. But I remember I'd been gone for so long that I came in and I was like, man, this. I'd rather smell the cows of the country than the sewage of the city any day. I was so glad to smell chicken litter. I wasn't, and some of you may not, but when you're away from it and you're out of your element and you're not where you're supposed to be, you miss the strangest things. So I don't envy pastors who have 2 talents or 3 talents. I've embraced my 1 talent. Sorry about this. A professor once asked me, he came to me, because everybody knew there that I wanted to be a church planter when I come back to my hometown. And they would all give me a hard time because a lot of them were city boys, and I was from the country, and we didn't identify with a lot of things. There was one other guy, Bobo. He was from South Carolina. We had a lot in common. But everybody's like some of the things that we do, like it didn't. We didn't have a lot in common. And so I had one of my professors come up to me one day, and it just intrigued him that this hillbilly wanted to go start a church. And he comes and says, why do you want to plant a church? Here, let me back up. I was taught this. We had church planting class, and I remember I was probably a freshman, sophomore, and they were talking about where the best places to plant a church is. And the best possible place that you could have a church, location-wise, is near interstate beside McDonald's. And so they would send out church plants out of their church all over the country. He said, if you can get near the interstate and buy McDonald's, you'll grow a church. And so I went through this church planting class, and I'm like, nothing made sense. And so they knew that. And so the professor comes up to me and he says, why do you want to go back to that little town and play? He wasn't discouraging me. He wasn't at all. I don't want to give the wrong impression. He was just curious. He says, why would you go back to that little town and over across the mountain and plant a church and just as nice as I could? I said, rednecks need Jesus too. And if I don't go, who will? Because nobody else in here is going to go there because they need the interstate and the McDonald's, and I don't desire it. I've embraced a one-talent preacher. I love my small town. I love the people. I love the smell of corn silage. Anybody else with me? When I love the smell of silage. It smells good. It smells great. Doesn't taste great. I love seeing fresh cut hay fields. You ever ride out like some of our roads where you can ride on just miles and miles of field? I love that. I love that everybody knows everybody. Sometimes that backfires, but for the most part, I think it's good. I think I shared this before, but like 2 months ago, somebody came knocking on my door, and I was studying. I was upstairs, and I get to the door in time, and they left. And so I was like, man, I wonder who that was. I hate that somebody came here and I go home and think I'm in the bed sleeping or something. So I was like, man, I wonder who that was. And so I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's kind of overkill, but I'm going to put it on Facebook. Hey, if you came by my house and you know, because nobody called me, nobody left a message. So if you came by my house and you were looking for me, hey, I'm home. Come on back. And I mean, 15 minutes later, it popped up on there from New Hope Grocery that my coach had been in there. And they said, oh, that was your baseball coach from when he was a kid. He was up here at the groceries. That's who it was. I mean, 15 minutes later, I knew what I needed to know. So that's good and bad. Just keep that in mind. But I love where I come from. God has called me here according to my ability so I can produce here. And I'm so glad he called me to share the greatest message to the greatest people. You've heard the statement before, little is much. Seriously? Little is much when God is in it. Come on. That's like a Jeopardy question. And I'm telling you all this because what God has gifted you with, you might not think is significant. And other people, like my professor, might look and say, it's not that significant. But you don't understand what your gift is doing to people that you don't even know. You know, you're in kids ministry, you're teaching them, they're in the most moldable time in their life. They're in the most the moldable time of their life as it keeps going further and further younger. It used to be, if there's statistics out there that you can, there's all kinds of different ones. But it's pretty average to say if a young person, it used to be like if you didn't get saved and become a believer or get in church before you were 18, it was 90% you weren't going to be in church. And now it's if you don't get your kids in church at like 6 and 7 and 8, the likelihood of them being in church when they're adult decreases drastically. It's getting younger and younger and younger. And so people who do our children's ministry, you got to think you are teaching them things that they're going to remember when they're 30 and 40 and 50. And those of you that grew up in church, you were in children's ministry, you remember that Sunday school teacher, that sweet little lady that taught you about Jesus and how it molded your life. And some of you get to be that to these kids. You know, I was thinking, can you imagine how good Billy Graham's Sunday school teacher must feel? I mean, seriously, she had him in her class, and she taught him the 10 Commandments, and here this man, he goes out and millions of people get saved because of his ministry, and I don't know how it started, but for some of these great preachers, it started in a Sunday school room. Something that people might not think is even that significant. Maybe there was 8 or 9 or 10 other ones around them, and they're just doing it. They just love children. They're doing that, but what a powerful ministry that you have. In nursery, I shared with you, hey, when you're in here, you were able to be in here because somebody else is over there. We have chairs to come in and sit on because some people, they come and put them up. We don't have to look at white bare walls and maybe like, well, we're looking at black bare walls. But we try to do something to make it look like that we're somewhere other than a fellowship hall. And so people do that. People do that so that we can be comfortable and have a better experience at church. Greeters, the first person that you meet when you get out of the vehicle and you come in to church, the first person you meet is a greeter. And so they can make or break your experience of church. Because as soon as they get there, if you're in a bad mood and you give them the fish handshake, I know what I'm talking about. You do the fish cold clammy handshake and don't grip their, and like you're not in a good mood. Your zipper's down, your shirt's halfway tucked in. You just gave them their first impression was not good. But I'll tell you, I've never ever heard. We don't have a lot of time to figure this all out, but I haven't so far in our long church history had one complaint about our greeter. And in fact, I've never really been in a church where I get feedback about the greeters. And here it's all the time. They're like, man, I love that somebody's greeting me at the door, and that makes church better. I hear about Brian Berge all the time. They love Brian Berge. Hey man, don't y'all love Brian up here?
Oh yeah.
Because for a lot of you, he was the first one I remember. I know I've shared this before. I'll share it again because a lot of you haven't heard it. It was our first Sunday. We were here. It was like 9:55 and nobody was here. It was like 16 of us. And we're sitting there and we're waiting. We're like, oh my gosh. And I felt so bad. I'm like, man, I've like pumped this up. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. People are going to come. They're going to come. Trust me, they're going to come. And for 6 months, I've been preparing for this. We get here, 9:55, nobody. 9:58, nobody. I'm like,
10 o'clock,
man,
nobody.
Nobody. I mean, nobody. And like 10 o'clock, people just start rolling in. And I was like, man. And so for a lot of those people, Brian Berge was the first one that they met. They were gifted according to their ability. We can focus so much on the areas that we're not good at, that we want to be good at, that we miss what our gift is. And like the first servant with the one talent, maybe you fear failure. You fear what it might happen if you use your ability. And so the master is saying to him, I didn't want to give you much. I didn't want to overwhelm you. I wanted to start you out with little to see if you could shepherd and be good over little, and I will give you more. And then finally we see the very obvious point is that in the end you reap what you sow. Whatever you put out and whatever you plant and whatever seed you scatter is what you'll reap in return, good or bad. Sometimes that we get people to do this, and you want to get revenge. You want to get after them. God says, "Vengeance is mine," says the Lord. There's all this talk about karma now. Let me say this: karma is not Christian, not Christian. That is Hindu. We're not in a world of the spirits. We believe in reaping and sowing, not karma. So that's just a pet peeve. Like it was like karma. No, that's Hindu. Like they're like reap and sowing. That's biblical. And so, but whatever you pour out is what you're going to get in return. And it's taught throughout the Bible. 2 Corinthians 9:6. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will reap bountifully. Proverbs 11:18, a wicked person earns deceptive wages, but the one who sows righteousness reaps a sure reward. Luke 6:38, give and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you see it will be measured back to you. And on you could go with the reaping and sowing in the Bible. And so the first servant and his 2 talents gained 2 more. The servant with 5 talents gained 5 more because he went out and he produced. And the first man who was given 1 talent says he was cast in outer darkness. And then some people said, I don't really think it was talking about hell, weeping and gnashing of teeth. I don't know where either. If it's not hell, I still don't want to be where he was at. Let's put it that way. But when you look at this, a principle, and it's just a parable that I think we can look at where God says, I've given you opportunity. Everyone, you all have been given opportunity to hear the gospel. You've all been given opportunity to believe and to repent and become a Christian. You've been given opportunity in life to serve or to work or to be a part of things. And you've been given these opportunities, and you have to choose how you're going to deal with them. And so, here's the thing: is salvation is not through works, but you will know. Jesus himself says, "You will know them by their works." It's nothing that you do to earn it, but if you got it, you're going to want to do something with it. I mean, if you have the cure to cancer, you're going to want to tell somebody. If you know the Savior of the world and how people can repent and be saved and become a believer and not be cast into outer darkness, we should want to tell them. I remember, I think it was Chuck Swindoll told a story about it. He said, man, it was, who's the owner of the Atlanta Braves? Ted Turner. So he's extreme atheist. And a preacher went to him one day and he tried to witness to him and talk to him, and he had none of it. He said, why are you so hard to the gospel? He said, I don't believe it. He said, I don't believe it. If what you're telling me is true, people should be out just telling everybody that they should be just raving. They should just be going crazy about it because they know that these people are going to die and go to a place like that. And you want to tell me that these people really believe that and act the way that they do. I mean, if we believe that, wouldn't we be begging our family and our friends and our neighbors? Wouldn't we want to tell them about Christ? I heard a man say one time, he said, nah, I'm not going to go there. I'm moving on. We're almost there. I don't know if the worship team are coming back up here, but I'm getting there. That makes them feel like I'm finishing up. So have you buried your talent or have you embraced it? Take the gift that has been invested in you and invest in other people. And then that person will invest in another person, and that person another, and that person another. And because you invested in one, 1,000 people may reap the benefits of that one person that you influenced. We had a football camp when I was in high school. I don't know, Joe, if you remember this. His name was Bill Williams. And he did camps all through the NFL with the Steelers and the Cowboys and these teams that he went and did camp with. Several of them went on to be Super Bowl champions. And so the thing I appreciated about him, he was very, very bold about his faith. He didn't shy away from sharing Christ with kids in a public school. He didn't care. Our coach was, he didn't gather in the team prayer or anything. They were very safe about that thing. This guy, first thing he got done there was talking about being a believer, how we need to get our life right, have a relationship with God. This is my kind of guy. And so he's down here and he's hardcore. But I remember one day he sat us all down and he said, I need to tell you a story. And he was talking about we were going through the fundamentals and going through the basics and how what we do impacts everybody else. If there's a weak gap in the middle, then it affects the whole team. If you don't do your job on the football field, there's a free man running around who's dangerous to our quarterback. If you don't do your job, it affects us all. And so he was talking about the significance and the importance of just holding a block or following through on a tackle. And he sat us all down. He said, I want to tell you this story. He said, I heard this story a long time ago, and I will never personally forget this. He said, there was a man who, through his life, he was a believer. He was a Christian, and every opportunity, and every chance that he had, he would talk to somebody about Jesus. But he was really interested and really reached out to the outcast and to the troublemakers and the people like me and you. And he would go and he would invest in those people. And because he would invest in those people, many of them became Christians. And this man, he lived a long life and he invested in these people. And the story goes, he gets to the pearly gates and he walks through the pearly gates. And he says, immediately as he comes in, these people just come up and they're saying, thank you. And another man came and said, thank you so much for what you did. And another person came and said, thank you. And he didn't know any of these people. This another lady came along and says, thank you. And Jesus is walking him through heaven and walking up the streets of gold. And all these people are coming to thank him. And he doesn't know why. And he finally turns to Jesus and says, why are these people thanking me? I don't even know who they are. He said, these are all the people that because you shared with one person, they shared with somebody else, and they shared with somebody else. If you hadn't witnessed to them on that day and they had never became a believer, there's 1,000 or 10,000 people that may have never came to the Lord because you didn't tell somebody. Because some of those people that you told were missionaries and preachers and Sunday school teachers and kids ministry teachers and greeters at the door and nursery workers, and they influenced people with Christ because you went to one, many believed. So doesn't that make you think, man, when you witness to somebody that you don't know the difference they're going to make in somebody else's life? D.L. Moody, one of the greatest evangelists in modern history, he sat at a revival, and he sat under this preacher, and the preacher was preaching, and he says, the world is yet to see what a man can do, totally surrender to God. And D.L. Moody, who sat in that pew, and as a young man, before he ever started his ministry, he was burdened, he was convicted, and that statement just penetrated his heart. And he says, I said to myself in that moment, he said, I'll be the one. I'll be the one who surrenders all. And D.L. Moody, getting towards the end of his life, over 1 million people had come to Christ through his ministry. He had shook the continents, 2 continents is what was said of him. He was the evangelist who shook 2 continents for the glory of God. But he got to the end of his life, and he was getting down there and talking about, man, what do you have? How did you do all this? And what do you think about all your ministry? And what would you leave behind? And some of his last words were, the world is yet to see what a man or woman can do, totally surrender to God. A man who led millions to Christ. D.L. Moody was uneducated. D.L. Moody was not a good speaker. People talk about D.L. Moody, and they're like, no, he was a terrible speaker. It gives me hope. But so many people, it's not about my ability, it's the Word of God. You know, when the revivals broke out all over the United States and into England and other places, you know what mainly they did? They stood and read the Bible. They stood and read the Bible for hours and hours, and people, Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. This is one of the most famous sermons that began revival all over. It says he was monotone, he couldn't see, he was up in his Bible, it was kind of dark, it was dimly lit, and he just read through the Bible. And people started falling down on their floors and weeping and wailing and crying and saying that they needed to get saved, they needed Christ. And revival broke out because somebody just read the Word. No poem, no 3 points. Can you imagine how many people will shake your hand in heaven? How many people have you influenced that will influence others? How many people will you share Christ with that will invest in other people? Take your talent, don't bury it, embrace it. And when you're ready to handle more, God will give it to you. Let's pray. Lord God, I thank you again for our church, Lord. I thank you for these people, Lord, who show up every week. They want to grow in their relationship with you. God, I pray that you would just burden them to share what you've given them to do. God, no matter how insignificant their talent may be, God, I pray that you would make them to be passionate about it. Lord, I pray if there's one that doesn't know you, Lord, that today would be the day. God, we pray for the people in Texas whose life they essentially gave their life for Christ because they chose to meet and have church in a little town just like ours.